Do none of you remember the name of that show?
No.
What are you talking about?
I told you about this show last week.
Which show?
It's it's this show about this young boy on this ultimate journey to becoming the best, and it's a story full of passion and hard work and sacrifice and trust and a serious lack of romance and growing together and unity and team spirit. Can you guess which show I'm talking about? Here's a better question. How many shows came to mind when I said that? Everything I said earlier could easily be the description for any shonen anime show out there. Shonen anime and manga has been popular for as long as I can remember. And I think for as long as it has existed. There are so many youngsters out there who have found solace and love in reading stories about other young boys and their journey to becoming the best, and their journey of struggle and sacrifice and finally achieving their dreams. But it is also true that we haven't really seen a significant change in what comprises a shonen show. Of course, shows falling under a certain genre are expected to be slightly similar to other shows falling under the same genre. But I don't think shonen anime has become any less popular. In fact, I think shonen anime watchers have grown in numbers and become more diverse over the years. Now, while I keep saying that shonen shows lack originality, I don't necessarily think that the quality of the shows have dropped or that they're not making good shows anymore. In fact, I think the shonen shows have become better. But does better really mean original? Does following the tropes of its preceding generations make it a good show? Does not adhering to stereotypes make it any less shonen? All the answers to these questions can be explained with what I like to call the chocolate cake theory. Basically, the theory talks about why shonen and shoujo mangas don't delve into original concepts and stick to tropes and repeated patterns. It's simple. It's because it works. And that's perfectly fine. I don't see it as a problem per se. In fact, if anything, I think it's a very intelligent move. From a marketer's perspective, this guarantees a higher success rate and reduces scope for making more mistakes because they're not really experimenting anything. They're not doing anything new. They're doing something that has been done before and that has worked before. The reason why a creator would even want to do this is because there is a willing and ready audience. There are people out there who don't mind reading this redundant, similar content. Audience is key here. They've become more diverse in nature because the shonen fandom, does not only have hardcore shonen fans anymore. There are people who are fans of other shows and other genres who also like shonen and like to watch shonen shows and read shonen manga. They have increased in numbers because of the same reason as point one. They're very willing, they want to watch and read shonen. And there is the whole old gen versus new gen thing where we've already had an older generation who have watched certain shonen shows from the older times that were still kind of popular and sort of ended while this new generation of fans were entering the fandom. Now that I've told you what the theory is, let's put it into perspective. How about we take Naruto, an old classic and everyone's favorite, and Boku no Hero Academia, the torchbearer for shonen shows and also very popular. For one, there are extreme similarities in the pattern of the story. Both are stories about a young boy who is an underdog who dreams to be the greatest, discovers/inherits immense power, and the rest of the story discovers his journey to becoming the greatest while befriending rivals, fighting enemies, etc., etc., etc. And of course, there's also the similarities between the layout of the story. We have a tournament arc, the whole part with the unexpected villain attack when they're not prepared but then still prove to be promising, and the whole backstory behind the mysterious power they have gained. I'm just keeping things vague because we all know how it went. We've seen Naruto and we've seen Boku no Hero Academia. This is not news. So what I'm trying to say is both Naruto and Boku no Hero Academia are made of flour, eggs, butter, sugar, baking powder. But even though both the shows have similar ingredients, they're very different shows. They're very different shows. But what makes them different? Well, for starters, icing. Icing is used to make a cake look good and also helps in hiding all the mistakes made during cutting and carving. And in case of the shows, Boku no Hero Academia is definitely a more well presented show compared to Naruto. And secondly, measuring cups. Baking is a science, and in some ways, so is making a story. You need to get the proportions right to make a well balanced, moist, delicious cake. Balance is very important. You can't keep a piece of chocolate eclair in front of me and say that's cake just because it has flour. Or show me free and say it's shonen anime just because it has boys. It doesn't work that way. What Boku no Hero Academia basically did is observe all the mistakes that its preceders made and fixed it. Learned from mistakes and improved it. In this context, I make it seem like Naruto has a lot of flaws and Boku no Hero Academia doesn't. That's not really the case. Despite and in spite all of its flaws, Naruto was insanely popular. And Boku no Hero Academia, despite having fixed those problems, is still insanely popular. Why is that? Simple. It's because of the most important ingredient of a chocolate cake. Chocolate. But we'll come back to that later. Now we know why shows do it. But why does it work? Easy. It's because of an ever-ready audience. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, there is this whole old generation and new generation thing. The newer generations are witnessing the end of an era with a lot of big league shows coming to an end. These are shows that we, the older fans, have had a lifetime to bond with, something they haven't. They've had a taste of it. They love it, which is why they crave it. They're hungry. This, paired with today's binge-watching culture, opens a market to make more of these stories. But better. So they keep wanting more. Until a new generation of fans come in, and that brings me back to point number 1. So far into the theory, we've spoken about why creators do it and why it works. And now for the final part of the theory. Why cake? Because it's versatile. Majority love it. It could be old and classic or upgraded and trendy and people will still want to eat it. There is no one way to make cake, just like there is no one way to make anime. And just like cake, making an anime is also a trial and error process. And of course, there are certain fundamental ingredients that are important for something to qualify as cake. And the same goes for shonen anime. Like, you can't give me a bowl of fruit and say that's cake. Similarly, you can't show me Sailor Moon and tell me that's shonen anime. And why chocolate cake specifically? Well, it's the most popular cake according to Google. And because in this theory, chocolate is symbolic of the genre. Because chocolate is the most important ingredient of a chocolate cake. And I think chocolate cake is that one cake that doesn't really have to be good for people to want to eat it. Kind of proving my point about shonen anime not having to be good for people to watch it. People will eat chocolate cake because it's chocolate cake and not necessarily because it's good. It's like a classic chocolate cake recipe passed down generations of grandmas. It's nothing new, but it's always a hit at brunch. The chocolate cake theory proves that the aim of the show is to not really be good. That's just an added bonus. The true aim is popularity. This is really good though. And the reason to stick to the recipe is simply because it's a sure shot to success. Again, it worked before, it'll work now. On a side note, I'd also like to say that the chocolate cake theory very much applies to shoujo manga as well, especially shoujo romance mangas. But I didn't use it as an example because, for one, they're not as popular anymore, or at least not as spoken about. And two, because they're basically the same and they're redundant, and the only difference between a majority of them is the art style. Actually, that could be a good topic for a different video because I don't see many people talking about shoujo manga. Comment down below if you think I should make a video about it. Coming back to my point, shonen anime was a more dynamic example compared to shoujo, which is why I only stuck to shonen anime for this video. Shoujo manga is like, you know those pre-packed cakes that you get in grocery stores? You get a craving for them every now and then, but the flavor or brand doesn't really matter because they all taste the same. In conclusion, no matter how old these tropes get, shonen and shoujo shows will always remain popular. No matter the taste of the chocolate cake, people will always want a bite.
Oh,
How is it?
so good. So
So good.
Can I have a bite?
No.
You got it.
What?